Well, what do you know? A Janus Halcyon 250, but this isn't just any old Halcyon. This is Devin's, the owner of Motocult. I've made a video on his Stage 4 Plus kit. Well, this actually has his new Paragon package, but this is a prototype. It's not a full production piece. There's still some things that need to be ironed out. Now, I will be making a video on the Paragon kit just like I did with that Stage 4 Plus, but in this particular video, what I'm going to focus on are some of my favorite and least favorite things about the Halcyon 250. Just kind of like I did with the Royal Enfield video, my most favorite and least favorite things. That one really did well for my otherwise small channel, so I figured it would kind of be cool to do something like that with this particular bike.
Bear in mind that I'm going to be talking about this motorcycle as if it's that of my own. Devin has only put maybe 20 miles on this bike total. Well, I've put over 1,000 miles on it over that course of it being bone stock with that Stage 4 Plus kit and this new Paragon package. So let's take this from the mindset of an owner's perspective and not necessarily for the sake of a potential buyer. Also, things like the whole Chinese engine origins and the price point of this bike being insanely expensive. Well, these are things we already know. So do we really need to talk about this for the 15th time as if this is like some new unheard of thing? We're all intensely familiar at this point, at least we should be. Let's not continue to beat a dead horse. At this point, that corpse is well rotted. Let's start with a huge positive. So, like with the Royal Enfield Classic 350, one of my favorite things about this bike is the look. The design, the old-timey style, kind of reminds me of old Indian singles, and maybe even an old Triumph Ricardo from nearly 100 years ago. There's tons of paint options with the overall paint scheme down to minor details like pinstriping on the tank, the rims, even chrome polished tanks, various different badging, gas caps. There's a lot to mess around with if you want to customize one of these bikes. You can even request a custom paint. I do wish they did metallic finishes with flakes in the paint, but hey, maybe that's just me. Either way, these are gorgeous looking machines. And it can't just be me, because this motorcycle draws a ton of attention. About 80% of the time if I'm at a gas station or I park this anywhere that there's people out and about, I am bound to have someone or even a couple of people come up to me asking about the bike. I think I maybe told this story before, but one day when my wife and I stopped at a park to take a quick break, I wanted to take some shots of our bikes side by side. And well, this young lady came up to me with her infant daughter asking to take pictures of the bike because of how much she loved the way it looks. She knew nothing about motorcycles other than her granddad had a 1950s Horrocks Regina, I think it was. This is 100% a motorcycle that is going to be a conversation starter from people of all walks of life. Young, old, male, or female, it doesn't matter. This is a bike that gives you a ton of attention. It's the same deal with my Royal Enfield. It's probably because where I live, a vast, and I mean vast majority of motorcycles I often see are Harleys or Indians. So seeing something different that isn't necessarily a metric bike like a Kawasaki Ninja is almost unheard of. So it creates this allure. People are drawn to it. People want to know more about it. And please understand, I'm very much an introverted person. I typically avoid conversations whenever possible. But I do enjoy the attention a little bit. I like the smiles on people's faces whenever they see and hear the bike. I like the conversations that random passerbys have with me. It's always fun. The conversations are always enjoyable. The only thing I can really complain about with the style is I wish that this engine came in a polished finish. You can get the fins polished and whatever, but I think the bike would look so much cooler and kind of fit with the style by having a polished look. At least make it an option. Some people strongly hate the way the bikes look, and you know, I can understand their reasons for it. Yeah, there's a bit that comes off like it's built in some dude's halfway decent garage. It doesn't really look like a full production bike. Maybe it comes off like a prototype that's not exactly finished. What can I say? I find it charming, if nothing else. One of the worst things about the bike is the rider comfort. Yeah, so this is not a comfortable bike, but not exactly in the traditional sense. After all, rider position's fantastic. I'm upright, mid-controls, which I love. The odd beach bars kind of take some getting used to, and they are kind of acquired of a taste, but they're alright, and I have a relaxed posture. All seems well. However, this is a hardtail motorcycle. It has no rear suspension, so you feel every little Midwestern bump, crack, any imperfection on the road, and it doesn't matter how much padding you put on the seat. In fact, this one has an upgraded Sergeant seat with the updated springs to help cushion, but it's still a hardtail at the end of the day. You feel everything on the road, and it travels up your spine. God forbid, by the way, you ever do go across train tracks or just rough terrain in general, it turns into, well, if I'm going to be 100% blunt, borderline cock and ball torture. Seriously, the one time I hit the tracks at 25 miles an hour, and these tracks weren't even really that bad, mind you, I nearly blacked out because of the jackhammer-like kicks that were happening to my nuts.
But if you think that's the end of where this whole discomfort stuff comes from, you would be dead wrong. See this tank here? It's a coffin-style tank. While it's cool, retro, fun, whatever, there is one huge glaring design flaw. You see, right here, in between the tank and the seat, is a very sharp edges, and I will cut to some footage to give you a better idea. The problem is, when you're sitting on the bike and you're just riding, those sharp edges of the tank are resting smack dab on your thighs. Why is that a problem? Well, for obvious reasons. If you hit a bump or a pothole or whatever, it's hitting right on your thighs. Last year when I had this bike, my thighs ended up having so much bruises on them, you thought I might have been hit with a baseball bat.
If this section of the tank was curved or just rounded, this problem would never exist. And I'm very critical about this because if nothing else, a rider's comfort is extremely high on my list I care about most in any motorcycle. And because of this, I cannot ride a Halcyon for long periods of time unless I absolutely know the route I plan on taking has halfway decent roads. The front end suspension, I don't know. It's a love or hate thing. As far as comfort goes, it is more firm than the typical modern motorcycle. It doesn't dive forward when you slam on the brakes due to that whole anti-dive feature of this style of fork setup. It is more rough when you hit a pothole or shitty section on the road, absolutely. But I'm going to touch more on that later. Another one of my absolute favorite things about this bike is the power. Okay, so this is where things are going to be significantly different because this is a heavily modified bike and not a stock one. A stock Halcyon 250, yes, is very much underpowered. In fact, it's painfully slow. You're very limited on the roads that you can take. After all, it only has like 12 horsepower stock. That being said, this Paragon bike, my god, it is night and day. I have taken this on highways going 65, even pushing 75 miles an hour, and I had zero problems with it. Yeah, you can go faster. Technically, I wouldn't be surprised if you can hit past 80. But I don't know if pushing this bike at those speeds is one of the best decisions in the world. For me, 60 to 65 is where I'm most comfortable for top speed kind of cruising. Now, before I get people saying, well, yeah, Foxy, these aren't race bikes, they're not performance bikes, whatever you want to say, I'm intensely aware of that. My main purpose for even wanting to make videos on the motocult performance stuff is to just really see if these bikes can be made, well, more well-rounded to the point of possibly turning them into daily riders instead of them basically becoming a weekend warrior bop to the coffee shop type bike. Furthermore, with that power, My god, is it fun as hell with all these upgrades. When you rip on that throttle, it's just impossible for me not to smile. Thank God, by the way, I do wear a full face helmet because I probably look like a blithering idiot riding around with this stupid grin on my face all the time. I often hear this phrase, and I have said it myself at one point, that it is more fun to ride a slow bike fast than it is to ride a fast bike slow. And these days, I kind of agree to a point. For me in particular, I find it more fun to take a slow bike and make it faster than to take an already quick bike like my Thruxton RS, for example, and make that even faster than it really already is. I don't really get to use the power of that Thruxton like I can with the Janus or even the Royal Enfield, for example. I get a thrill out of pushing more horsepower and more torque out of that bike and the Janus. Thruxton is what, 105 horsepower? If I add 10 more horses to that bike, I might probably notice it, but not anywhere near in comparison to pushing 10 plus additional horses onto a bike that only has 12. It probably makes no sense to a lot of people, but for me, there's something about modifying and upgrading slower bikes that just makes me super happy. I get a rush out of it. I can't help that. Another thing I don't exactly care for is the fact that these bikes don't have any sort of gas gauge. Now, hey, look, I get it. The bike draws inspiration and replicates old vintage motorcycles where gas gauges were not exactly a thing. I got that. I've had motorcycles in the past that didn't have gas gauges, so I understand, though I'm used to bikes kind of bogging out when the fuel is low, which would indicate that, hey, switch that to reserve and go to the nearest gas station.
Funny thing about that, this bike doesn't do that. There is zero indication whatsoever that the bike is out of fuel, except for when it cuts power immediately, forcing you to fumble about trying to get to that reserve switch, which is not all that easy unless you have practiced numerous times. So what that poses is a pretty much potential danger if you're in the middle of going on a highway road or busy road and you're just not all that familiar with the bike. You might think something's wrong and not know what to do because you're in a panic.
The other thing, and this is probably more due to the upgrades, this bike's range is terrible. You probably have about 80 to at most 100 miles before you need to switch to reserve, which, depending on how you travel, it's almost imperative that you mount one of those jerry cans to the luggage rack so you don't get accidentally stranded. So, one of my favorite things about the Janus 250 is how stupid easy they are to work on. And hey, I am no means a mechanic. Yeah, I kind of tinker and dick around a bit, but do not come to me for any major jobs because it ain't happening. Except for the Janus. They're simple. They're so easy to work on. Better yet, Janus the company has released a ton of maintenance videos on their YouTube channel with step-by-step directions on how to work on the bike, from basic stuff like oil changes, bleeding brakes, clutch cable adjustments, down to more complicated stuff like valve adjustments, and the bane of my existence involving anything electrical. I don't know of any other company that does this as well as Janus does. That sort of stuff to me is just really cool. It helps, in my opinion, get people to work on their bikes and give them the confidence in doing the work on their own. I don't really know of any other motorcycle company that does stuff like this, encouraging people to work on their own bikes, and I think that's really cool. In the event you're not comfortable working on the bike, any half-decent powersports shop shouldn't have any problem working on it. Quite frankly, if they're not comfortable working on a Janus, they probably shouldn't be working on any motorcycle, period. If I can do it, and a shop with a certified, trained mechanic can't, that's a problem.
Hey, did you know, fun fact, if you cover the J in Janus, it spells anus? Yeah, I didn't know, especially after the 500 comments of people feeling the need to point that out on various videos. I might have to let my friend Jack Mehoff know about this.
officer.
Me off. Jack.
All right. The last thing I want to talk about is the handling. So this, for me, is one that I kind of have to hover in the middle because I have straight up mixed feelings. The bike, for me, all things considered, handles exceptionally well for what this motorcycle is. However, if you are expecting it to handle like a modern bike with modern suspension, even something from the 80s or 90s, it's simply not going to do anything for you. For me, I can corner on this just fine. Low speed, high speed curves, I don't have any problems with it. The front leading link suspension is weird and interesting, but I haven't had any problems with it. But for me to speak for everyone, that would be entirely disingenuous. Plus, honestly, this is the first motorcycle I've ever ridden with this type of front end setup. It's also the first hardtail I've ever been on, so I have nothing to compare it to. Is it better or worse than whatever other bike with this exact same sort of setup has? I don't know, but I would love to find out. What is a huge negative for me in terms of handling are these tires. They, for whatever reason, use vintage tread patterns on their bikes. I'm sure it's because it fits the image of the vintage bike, but they simply handle like dog shit. I've never liked vintage style pattern on any motorcycle, quite frankly, and with these wheels being as skinny as they are, if you end up going over parallel cracks in the road, tar snakes, hell, even rain groove roads, it creates all sorts of potential serious handling problems. Skinny tires, especially vintage style tires, do not mesh with rain groove roads. Same with dual sports, honestly. Hell, even my Royal Enfield and especially my Versys 300 with those stock IRC GP210 tires, truthfully, I don't know if the leading link suspension plays any role in the way the bike handles with those rain grooves. I'm absolutely not qualified to make any real assessment on that. You know what's really funny? Because I purposely rode this motorcycle for hundreds of miles without getting on anything else, when I got on my wife's Triumph Speed 400 just to, move it around the garage and the driveway, I thought something was wrong with her bike. I was like, holy shit, why is this front end so heavy? Something has to be wrong. But there wasn't any problem whatsoever. It was just my mind playing tricks on me due to how light that front end is on the Janus, let alone the bike itself. It's such a lightweight bike. So now this brings me to a huge question. Why the hell would anyone spend this kind of money, which is over $7,000 plus the Paragon package, on a not all that comfortable bike in reality, an archaic, if not obsolete suspension with zero rider aids that people are right to argue makes it more of a detriment on the riding experience than, say, a bike with half the price point from a true modern classic like, say, Royal Enfield or Triumph or whatever else? It's a question I honestly don't have a good answer for. But then I ask myself, is this the worst handling bike I've ever been on? Oh god, no. Definitely not. But does that give Janus a pass because it's simply not the worst? Also, absolutely not. I'm really conflicted. Like, I totally get the idea and point, but whether it translates to the real world in 2025 is really up to the individual rider.
At the end of the day, this is an extremely niche motorcycle for an even more niche market with a cult-like fan base. I completely 100% understand why people would want absolutely nothing to do with these bikes, and in reality, I wish I didn't. I should, for all intents and purposes, considering I have Triumphs, I have Royal Enfields, I have technically better motorcycles, I should hate this. But for some reason, as bizarre as it might be, I just don't. I kind of like it. It's weird, it's quirky, It has a charm to it. And I can't help it. I just like it.
So that's my take on the Janus Halcyon 250. Some of my favorite and least favorite things. These bikes are 100% not for everyone. And this wasn't exactly meant to be a review, more of a, hey, this is what you should expect out of the bike, should you so happen to get one, and get one with all the performance parts tacked on from Motocult. Which, by the way, not even from a speed and acceleration standpoint, but the bike just runs significantly better with these parts added on. It's smoother, it's less buzzy, and I don't feel like I have to wring the neck out of the motor like you physically have to do on a stock bike. Plus, it starts and idles stupid easy compared to stock, which gave me some problems here and there in the cold. Like I said before, I have no affiliation with them. I'm just an odd cat that likes motorcycles and video games, and that's the content I make on the internet. I do not get paid for it. I don't want your money. I just want to ride bikes and share my experiences with them. It's all in good fun. And with that, take care everyone. Ride safe out there. I will see you next time.